Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode number 31 of hashtag Jeopardy Live Panel, presented by the JeopardyFan.com. Once again, I am Andy Saunders. I am moderating the panel discussion for this evening. Normally, I start by introducing the panelists, but we have one who has not a lot of time with us this evening, so we're just going to go straight off the top and say, in case you missed the news earlier today, the registration for the next round of Jeopardy online testing opened at Jeopardy.com. There are 7 audition cities around the country, ranging from Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Tampa, Atlanta, Kansas City, and Boston. So I believe those were the 7 available when I registered. But to talk about that and a lot of online test and audition tips, actually, we have from J-Board and former contestant himself back in 2008, Randy Gold. Thanks for joining us, Randy. So I believe you put together a bunch of online test tips that are available to anyone who wants them?
I did. Thank you for having me on, Andy. Actually, last year I put together a couple of pages of tips, having taken the test myself, having seen how it's developed over the years. The Jeopardy people themselves put out on their website some tips, but they're pretty brief, and they really don't necessarily get at the heart of what it's like to sit in front of a test. So, just to go through a couple of them real quick, I mean, they fit into a number of different categories. As for example, some might be just very specific things that you should know about taking the test. Like, for example, each question you're given 15 seconds, which could be a lot of time and it could be not a lot of time. It depends how familiar you are with the subject, how familiar you are with the clue, how you can read the clue. But you should use your 15 seconds. You can just say submit and you'll get on to the next question, but there's really no point in doing that. There's no point in rushing yourself through it, because you might realize after you hit the submit button, uh-oh, I shouldn't have done that. I put down the wrong answer. Well, if you still have time left, you can obviously retype it. So you have things like that. You have also very specific things like you don't need to put it in the form of a question. I mean, they tell you that, but you still have to remind yourself that you don't want to waste time putting it in the form of a question or put in a question mark. Things like that. Then you have kind of let's call them kind of the mind games of don't overthink your response. It's a 15-second question, including typing it out. They're not trying to trick you. So if you really are just going into the mind games and overthinking it, then you're going to probably end up either thinking too long and missing the chance to submit an answer, or you'll end up putting the wrong answer down because you've overthought it. Does anybody else have an opinion about that? I mean, my feeling about being on the show, taking the test, and seeing all this is that they really are never trying to trick you.
No.
Okay,
Yeah,
I don't think. One. Go ahead, Jen.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I appreciate having all the 15 seconds, but I am terrified of overthinking things. I just want to give the answer and get it out of the way.
Yeah, I would say if you know you're absolutely 100% sure of the answer, sure. But the thing is, some people work well moving at a good pace. Other people, will appreciate a few seconds of thought in between the time, because once that next question comes up, again, you're back into the 15-second mode.
Yeah.
And most
so use your time to your advantage. I think that's what it comes down to. And looking at some of the exams that have already been given that are available on YouTube that actually are screen images, screen videos that actually can help you time yourself, you can actually see what it's like to sit through one of these exams if you've never done it before. It is an experience. If you haven't actually gone through something where you are finished with 50 questions in literally 12 or 13 minutes at most. It really helps to be able to do that, to see what it's like to sit through a timed exam. You may have taken the SAT or something equivalent to that, but this is nothing like that. I mean, this is just so much faster. And then another thing is, once you finish that question, forget it. You cannot undo it, regardless of what you did. So again, it comes back to the mind games. You got to tell yourself, once it's out there, just go on. Get the next question. Everyone is worth exactly the same as every other one. So don't think to yourself, oh, I made a mistake there. I should have done this. Forget it. It should be totally out of your mind.
And it's a lot like playing the show, anyways, because a lot of Jeopardy questions, they don't want you to overthink them anyways. A lot of them you should know the answer, especially if you've been watching the show years and years and years. That's Jeopardy.com's #1 piece of advice. Watch the show, and you'll get a chance. You'll get a good idea of what the answer is, because we pretty much rehash the same subjects over and over and over. And of course, when you're on the show, I'm sure you guys who have been on the show can vouch for this. You have to just let whatever you said in the previous question go, because next one's coming right at you. So it's a lot. It's a good analogy for being on the show, and well, that's what the test is. If you want to be on the show.
Now, Eric, you wanted to say something?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I think, not surprising. I think I actually did mine pretty quickly. I think, remember taking the online exam, I just kind of, put the answer down and then enter and move on to the next one. It was,
From my own experience writing, I let the 15 seconds run out every time, because from my own perspective, I also get into a bit of a rhythm. In that question, answer, pause. Question, answer, pause. So
it is a very individual thing, and that's why I recommend actually sitting for one of those YouTube exams. I mean, you don't have the luxury there of actually hitting the submit button, but you could actually see what it's like for that 15-second period. And if the person who was videoing it actually was pressing submit at the same time, then it maybe have been less than 15 seconds. So you can kind of get an idea about what the max is.
Yeah. So now, moving on from the online tests, though.
Let me just add one thing, because you mentioned that I had put together a document. If anybody is listening, either now or in the future, if you'd like a copy of this document, just write to me at randy@getonjeopardy.com, and I will be happy to send you a copy of the document.
Yes. And I will leave a comment on the blog with that email address as well, so that anyone reading and might not have been able to write that down will be able to contact Randy as well for that one. So I will do that shortly after we go off the air this evening. Now, if the audition or if the online test happens to go well for you, then you might get invited to an audition, and we have some information about that as well from. We've got Harvey. We've got Harvey Stolikovitz. He recently auditioned in D.C. Also, Randy, you also have, along with Stephanie Yas, put a nice webinar together about what to expect in an audition. So if you want, I don't know, if you guys want to talk about your own audition experiences and maybe to shed some light on what to expect if the online test goes well. I guess Randy start off, and then if anyone else wants to chime in, then go ahead.
Okay. I mean, the first thing to think about in audition for Jeopardy, I guess two things to think about it. One is that it's an interview. It's effectively an interview for a very specialized job. If you don't prepare for any interview, any job interview that you go for, then you're missing out. You're just fooling yourself. You can't wing it. I mean, obviously people do. I mean, there probably are examples of people who have winged their interview, their audition. You really should call it the audition. But I think of it as an interview.
I saw Justin smiling and nodding, but
I just showed up sober and awake and just went with it, and I can't really advise. I can't really turn that into any generalizable advice, though, unfortunately.
That was
Justin is just so charming that it's just, he's just got it.
At my audition a week and a half ago in D.C., one of the other people who was trying out, Maggie, the senior contestant coordinator who's now a producer, asked this person, "So tell me about yourself." And the first thing he said was, "I'm pretty boring. I like to hang out with my friends." And it turned out he actually had some good stories, but it kind of makes a bad first impression when this person clearly hadn't thought things through ahead of time. And so I think it is important to kind of have a game plan going in and be be prepared to answer basic questions like, tell me about yourself, in a way that's going to have an attractive lead. And another question that you're definitely going to get asked is, what will you do with the money if you win? And so even if your answer involves something like travel, which is pretty common, try to make it a little different than the generic, I would like to do some traveling, or I would like to pay off some student loans. You really need to prepare ahead of time for those.
That's a really well
If you
taken.
think of boring. Oh, go ahead, Justin.
That's a really well taken point, because a lot of the time the follow-up question is where they're really going to be trying to assess if you can think on your feet or if you say, oh, I want to travel, and they say, great, where? If you don't have some kind of idea in the back of your head about where you might be traveling, that kind of makes it sound like it's not an answer you thought about very much, or an answer that you sincerely mean.
And that's
So
where
you just have to be prepared for the follow-up question.
They're going to take you off script. Before the audition, you get some paperwork to fill out, including a list of 5 interesting anecdotes about yourself, and they can ask you anything from among what you've written down on that list of 5 items. And I actually practiced my 5 items with Dave, who's part of this talk, but I didn't get very far through any of the ones that were covered before Maggie started interrupting with all sorts of tangential questions. So you really do need to not just know what subject matters you want to talk about, but kind of think through, well, what is this going to lead to, and be ready for whatever direction they take you in, and be ready to just answer whatever questions the producers ask you.
Impromptu speaking skills is definitely a must.
Oh, Harvey, I know, knowing that you have a quite an interest in karaoke, did they ask you to sing?
No, they did at one of my prior auditions back in 2005. But not surprisingly, because I had written it at the top of my form, the fact that I've sung in 38 countries was the item that Maggie left with. But then she started asking more specific questions about it. And one thing that was really nice and surprising was that she actually read to the room one of the items that I had written on the application that I blog about my karaoke travels, and she actually read out the URL. So she was actually doing some of my work for me. That was a very unusual occurrence, but I was a little disappointed that I wasn't actually asked to sing.
Well,
but you were ready.
Yes.
I was ready, and I knew exactly what I was going to sing to.
Yeah, from my own audition experience from 2008, Maggie found out because I was working as a karaoke DJ at the time, and Maggie found that out, and I ended up having to drop a few bars of Ricky Nelson's "Hello, Mary Lou." So I was caught off guard, but I thought I did okay. Not that it helped me any, but you've got to be prepared for pretty much anything.
But it was a great experience just being there. Number one,
oh yes,
great experience, and number two is that if you get called again, you've already done it. You have that under your belt.
Yeah.
It's like taking the online test. Don't expect miracles the first time you take it, but if you've taken it once, you get a real good idea about what it's like, and you probably will do better the next time.
Now, I know you probably have to go soon, as it's showing up as about 14 minutes after on my own clock.
I do.
So if you do have to step out, I do want to thank you for joining us tonight, Randy. And also, once again, I will post Randy's email address as a comment on the Jeopardy fans post for this, in case anyone wishes to contact him asking for the document he's put together with online test tips.
Let me add one other thing.
By all
Maybe you were going to
means.
say this because we talked about the audition. That audition that you mentioned up top that I did last year with Stephanie Yass, who is the
Yes.
7-time champion and Battle of the Decades participant. We did it last May, and it is still up and available and still 100% relevant. So if anybody's interested in either preparing for your own audition, or if you're just interested in getting more into the details about what it's like to go through an audition, that is available to you. If you go to jeopardyaudition.com, there is a sign-up screen. There is no charge. And you'll be given instructions on how to get to the replay. It'll say that it's coming up in May, but actually it's from last year. We just haven't updated the page, but the replay is available for everybody.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Randy. And now...
Thank you so much.
Okay, now to introduce the rest of the panel, which I usually do off the top, but decided I wanted to give Randy's information as much time as possible. So first up, returning to our panel once again, we have JBoard moderator and J-Archive archivist David Kendall. Thanks for joining us once again, David. We also have 4 new panelists. We have Harvey Silikovitz, who you've already heard has recently auditioned for the show. We also have a rather big name in Jeopardy history. We have Justin Sausville. His wife Kristen has been on our panel the last couple of weeks, and still in his household has won the most number of games of Jeopardy. But we also have from Kristen's taping group, Jen Jabali Blackburn, and also from last Friday's show, Eric Swanson. So, thanks for joining us, panel. Normally I lead with the This Week in Jeopardy history, but instead it's second this time. I don't know if any of you saw what Jeopardy posted or what other people posted a lot on social media, but the very first episode of the Art Fleming era of Jeopardy aired on this day back in 1964. So Jeopardy, you are turning 51. So happy birthday to the show. Moving backwards through the other stuff, the Battle of the Decades 2000 week was this week last year. I think the definite heavyweight game was Stephanie Yost, Roger Craig, Vijay Balse, which took place on the Tuesday. Rebecca Ryder's 5 wins took place in 2011. 2010 had Christopher Short's 6 wins. 2010 had an April Fool's joke. Will Ferrell, Neil Patrick Harris, Jeff Probst, and Pat Sajak made cameos. Alex Trebek wore a phony mustache in 2008. Chris Miller won his 5 games in 2004, Bob Fleener in 2001, Pat Healy in 1998. The April Fool's Day episode in 1997 was the most famous in terms of April Fools because Pat Sajak hosted his only episode. I don't know if you guys remember that at all, but Final Jeopardy was the fun category of amateur Trinidadian ichthyologists. All 3 contestants pretty much ducked, covered, and ran with their final bets, and we're faced with the only question in that category, the only correct answer in that category, namely the guppy, which was named after a Trinidadian pastor. And then David Sampaniero, he had his run in 1996, and Dan Avila, from better known for his work or for his run on Greed, I believe, a few years later. He won a game on This Week back in 1991, and that is This Week in Jeopardy history. I was remiss in not doing this thank you last week, but also thanks to Mark Barrett. He helps me put that together every week. Now for some panel questions. I got a question from the user, do I have to really, on JBoard recently, and I realized that I might think it's old hat, but might not be for some of the others, but it might be not, or so I should say that this might be new for people who haven't been watching the show as long. But some questions about the inner workings, and I guess all of you who've been on the show can answer this. How does the buzzer work on rebound questions?
So on Rebound, the
Go ahead.
So on rebound, the enable lights that are on either side of the game board come back on. They're manually turned on when the initial response is rejected by Alex or by the judges. And the timing of that I always found to be a little more challenging than the timing of initially picking up the clue, because there's not that cadence that Alex's voice has that you can cue off of to hit the signaling device. You kind of have to guess when those lights are going to come on after the initial response is rejected, and so I felt like I missed a lot of rebounds.
Eric or Jen, do you have anything to add on that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get any of ours. I think Michael got every single one of the rebound answers. So yeah, I mean, including my two. So yeah, I couldn't say much about the timing of it.
I think maybe I got one. I don't remember very well. The buzzer, I was completely defeated by the buzzer under pretty much any circumstance. So it was tricky.
I think that's a common theme amongst many players, is that the buzzer is very tricky, and at least that's one thing I have heard from many a panelist who have been on the show, that the buzzer is a very fickle beast, and
extremely.
Yes. And his other question, is there any time, the other question that was asked by, do I have to really, do they cut out any time between Alex reading the questions, or is what we see on TV exactly the way it is to the seconds, unless there's a stoppage in play?
So we had, there were a few during the week that I was there. I remember the Dutch East India question that Al Cho had on Thursday. There was quite a long delay while they researched that one. I want to say, it was like about 10 minutes while they went and did that. And then actually in my episode, the Chilean current question that Jacqueline got correct at the start of Final Jeopardy, there was, we saw the category for Final Jeopardy, and then there was actually quite a long period where they went over that. I think, again, probably 5 minutes or so.
Okay.
Other than stoppages, everything is in real time as far as I know.
Justin, maybe you can answer this, because you've been in the TOC semifinals, and I know that they make a point of getting all 61 questions in on quarterfinals. Semifinals. I'm sorry. Or whatever. They make a point of getting all 61 questions in, and do they maybe cut a little bit of Alex's of pauses then and Alex's chatter? What do they cut when they have to trim it down to get all 61 questions in?
I can't say that they don't pare away any dead air that might have found its way into the episode. I will say that with TOC level competition, it's pretty rare that stuff gets left on the table.
That's
now,
true.
I can't imagine that nobody has ever tried to play clock ball in a TOC semifinal, right? I mean, I've done that. I know I've done that before, where you've got that 1 minute warning, you're leading, and so when you call a category, it becomes a little more like, I'll take animals for 400, please, Alex. I mean, that's a little exaggerated, but you can manipulate the timing a little bit. So I don't know how that would play out in the TOC.
I think that might be something that might get utilized a little more in regular play than a Tournament of Champions.
Yeah.
And for those of you who have watched today's episode, know my own thoughts about what happened with the minute to play. But pro tip: when you're being locked out and there's a minute to play, you might want to go to the higher level clues on the board if you think about it, because you're trying to make back a large monetary deficit, and $400 clues usually aren't very conducive to that. But as Michael actually commented back to me on Twitter earlier this evening, saying he was very happy when his opponents wanted to play $400 clues.
I bet.
Yeah. So I'm sure we will be able to get him on a panel at some point. I believe he may. He's out west, so he probably is. I'm guessing he is dealing with another viewing party this evening. So that's just my own gut instinct. But okay. I know my first question that I was going to ask, in terms of Al and the East Indies Daily Double, was the Dutch East Indies Daily Double was how long was the tape stoppage, and that was already answered. So I
think it was about 10 minutes.
Yeah, because
Maybe a little less than that.
Well, me watching the game, I can usually tell when there's been a jump cut, and when somebody has actually had to. When the judges had to stop and think about it and rule, and I guess they likely also stop tape a lot of the time when a daily double's been found, just in case they have to adjust the scores at that point, just to move on or go back to a previous question that was asked. But
do they tend to make the score adjustment right before a daily double is given or before Final Jeopardy?
They do, because in order to make the wagering proper, that way a contestant can't come back and say, "Oh, because you later because you later made this ruling, I would have wagered differently on the daily double." So that way, as far as I can tell, they do that to limit the disadvantage to any particular contestant.
I think a lot of the time they recognize the need for a score adjustment fairly quickly, but daily doubles and the beginning of Final Jeopardy are sort of organic opportunities to make that correction without disturbing the flow of the game. And breaking the flow in something that's as dependent on getting into a rhythm as effective a buzzer use is, breaking somebody's rhythm can put them on a profound disadvantage. So it's not really fair to break in the middle of the action. Make a scoring adjustment.
That is, I would say that's also quite a good and fair point. Now, Jen, you were part of Kristen's taping group, and she did very well and won a lot of money. So, how was it? I guess facing Kristen up in rehearsals.
I'm glad I didn't have to go up against her in a real game. She was fantastic. It's funny, I actually only saw one of her games in studio because I left at the lunch break. It was my two games and then hers. So I wasn't around for her second game. I wasn't around when she was playing Stephanie and Brad. So that was a shock. But yeah, she was great.
Mm-hmm. Now I guess the first daily double you got to play in your first game, it was in the 3Bs category, and I suspect it was the only one you got to play. Do you wish you'd bet more on that?
Yes. Immediate, as soon as it came out of my mouth, I wish I did more. But honestly, I was feeling so unsure on the buzzer, and at that point, I was thinking, even though I feel confident in the category, if I don't get this, I don't know how I'm going to get back in. So it was rough.
But, I guess it ended up working out for you to the tune of one win for sure. Was Penny also strong, would you say? Or what were your impressions of her before actually playing her?
Penny was a destroyer. I mean, just in the game that I played her, she was so locked in. And, I mean, she was just Mickey, the other woman. Neither of us had a chance on the buzzer. Every time we went for it, we got locked out.
Yeah, going back to the J archive, it looks. I mean, Penny got in 26 times, and the two of you guys combined were about 15, 25. So
it was rough. Like, by the end, I think the last category on the board was the Nixon administration category. And at that point, I was just so thoroughly demoralized. I was just like, okay, this is... I gave it my best.
And then Penny, of course, went 4 for 5, and
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, again, that's sometimes going up against the buzzsaw can happen, and I mean, in every single game of Jeopardy, there are 2 more losers than there are winners. So you can say that definitely now with the fact that there is no more tiebreakers. Speaking of which, had you heard about when you heard from Maggie that there were no more ties going into your taping? What was your reaction?
It made the math more pressing, that's for sure. I am terrible with quick math, and as soon as I heard that, I was like, man, I really have to get this right when I'm betting. Like, I just knew it was so much more precise. But it was interesting to hear.
Eric, what about you? Had you
Yeah, I had not heard beforehand myself, and yeah, it definitely made me reevaluate how I was going to bet in the end. Yeah.
Had either of you done any looking at, say, for example, the final wager?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I went through a bunch of those, the tutorials just to see what the ideal wager would be. I did some variant on that in my game. Obviously, it was sort of the wrong choice, but yeah, I looked at those a lot.
I was surprised by Keith's reaction to your wager, actually. When I saw the game myself, I tweeted at Keith saying, asking if his health was okay after having seen the betting, but or at least had I faced your wager, I probably would have gone smaller than you did. But again, Keith, he didn't have much of a problem with it. So I mean, he looks at that stuff every day. So I definitely feel like I should defer to what he says on that one. So
yeah, I mean, I was definitely gonna. I obviously should have gone smaller. That would have been the better play in the end. But yeah, I guess going into it, I wanted to kind of go big. I mean, we'd missed one question all game, so I figured one of us would get it. I covered a strategic low wager of if Michael bet enough just to cover me. Yeah, I forget the math of it, but yeah. Anyway, I was gonna bet it all, and then I ended up changing last minute because I was worried that I would miss it and then finish third. So the very last minute, I took off enough to cover Jacqueline, but yeah, what are you gonna do? It was tough.
Do you wish you'd bet more on your author's daily double?
I mean, kind of. I mean, I bet a lot.
Yeah,
but,
you did bet. I mean, you bet 5,000 out of 10.
Yeah. I mean, I felt really good about the category. And like as soon as I saw the question, I knew it. But then again, like I hit the next question and left the S out of Dreiser, so I almost did it again there. So something like that could happen. So yeah, in hindsight, I should have just gone all in. I knew all of those. So I have authors down pretty good, but that's a game.
I think one thing I noticed that Well, a recurring theme here is that I've seen a bunch of panelists, at least tonight, say they wish they did more. So if you're tuning in looking for tips on the online test and go all the way and get the call, then you may want to look at betting a little bit more. I know it's worked out for Michael quite a bit. He had, if you've seen tonight, have all of you guys seen tonight's episode?
I saw it. Yeah.
Not yet.
Okay. Well, then I'll save Harvey from the spoiler. So, but yes, I would say that I mean the winner of Justin's tournament is probably the poster boy for big daily double betting, and
Yeah, I was looking on the Jeopardy.com site recently, and they had tips from some past people. And I know one of the things that Ken Jennings was saying on Jeopardy.com is go big on the daily doubles, because the best way to win is to put as much distance between you and the other people by the time Final Jeopardy comes around, so that you don't have to worry about what you're going to wager on Final Jeopardy if you have a lock. And the best way to get a lock is go big on the daily doubles. That's one of the things that they put on Jeopardy.com that Ken was saying.
Of course, you still have to get them right when you go big on them.
Yeah.
And that was something, of course, in the Battle of the Decades that unfortunately didn't work out for Roger that time around.
yes, especially with the home province of our panelist, Mr. Kendall.
Lake Winnipeg.
But you know, again, that is Jeopardy. Eric, what was your thought process on your final?
On my final wager?
No, not the final wager. Your final answer when you went for Amtrak.
So, I didn't put together that it was an airline. For some reason, I got stuck on just ground transportation things, and I couldn't think of anything that was a valid answer. And I honestly just didn't want to have nothing down there.
Yeah.
So you can see me scribbling last minute. I mean, I knew what Amtrak stood for, and I just didn't want to have anything down there. I mean, I don't know if Michael did the same thing with Greyhound, but yeah. Airlines never entered my mind.
Well, I think that I mean, in terms of, I guess, if you're looking at Pavlovian stuff in terms of independence, 1948 is usually a reference to Israel. And I mean, had between that and Hebrew, I'm thinking if you get that far, then I think your what else could it be turns into, well, what's their airline?
Oh yeah, and I didn't put that together, unfortunately. So yeah, that dark music.
I think most people who missed it, including me watching at home, kind of overlooked the 1948 part of the clue. And I was trying to think of biblical references, and that was the wrong
That's
way
what I
to
was
go.
doing. And
I got stuck there too.
The year never even entered my mind as significant, which obviously it should have.
Usually, I'm saying this to the viewing public, but by my experience watching the show, it seems like a lot of the time there's a reason for every single word they put into that Final Jeopardy clue, and so.
A lot of clues, especially Final Jeopardy, have what we call the TOM, the tease out metric, where there's a glaring hint pointing at there. But with that, with that 1948 transportation clue, you didn't know whether the glaring hint was the Bible or the year. And I guess for me, I thought, it was the biblical reference, so I was going through that.
Well, I mean, 1948 plus Hebrew, at least in my mind, put Israel squarely in the. Yes, this has to do with Israel, and then.
If I had gotten to Israel, I would have had it in a second.
Well, I mean, it didn't. None of you on stage got it, which I mean, again, testament to how much different and difficult it can be under the lights, and I think that a lot of the people who tend to comment negatively towards people on Twitter should be, especially over the next couple weeks, should be to simply send this person a link to the online test registration and say, here, sign up, you try. In 2 weeks, maybe you'll let me know what your score was.
Yeah.
Put a push up, yeah.
It sounds like I think Kristen wanted to do that with a couple people, so.
Yeah, I remember that was her method.
Okay, now at this point, we do have, it looks like, oh, okay. So we've got a couple of comments from some people on Twitter using the hashtag Jeopardy Live Panel, and I do appreciate all of those. From @JeparTweet, the first one, tune into hashtag Jeopardy Live Panel to see Justin in a living room, Eric in a workshop, sorry, David, and David in a disaster zone. And then also, after watching the final wager, if I ever got to final, I'd be so paranoid making the right wager, I'd forget to answer the question. Sounds like we have a budding comedian tuning into our live panel this evening. But I do appreciate all the comments that happen to come in, and so. If you're listening and want to say something, use hashtag Jeopardy Live Panel on Twitter, and likelihood I will read it out. The only thing I will not read out is if you happen to offer a Siberian cigar to any member of our panel. But,
does that person actually tweet to you during these?
He has not. He has never tweeted to us during a panel. However, at one point he left a comment on our website, which was swiftly deleted. But, yeah, yes, thankfully that has not been tweeted at us, because even if it were, I wouldn't have read it out. A couple of things. I want to get the panel's idea about this, because Jeannie's working on a couple of projects, actually, along with the to go alongside our live panels. So basically, Jeannie is going to be doing some new video segments for the website where she interviews past champions and past contestants, detailing things that they've been up to since their appearances. I mean, one idea she's had was possibly, maybe Jason Keller coming on and talking about some stuff, or anyone else people might want to hear. I guess if you're viewing and have an idea for the name of kind of a Where Are They Now segment, please suggest that to us. If any of our panel has any ideas for that, please let us know. Once again, if you're viewing on YouTube, hashtag Jeopardy Live Panel, or if you guys have any possible ideas, or anyone you think that might be a good person to talk to. Any naming ideas, guys?
I had sent a message to Jeannie the other week, but I was absolutely fascinated when Kate Waits was on the other week. I thought she was great. Just, considering how many different iterations of the show she's done, you can just get so much out of that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that I would agree. I absolutely loved when Kate was on our panel recently, because she was such a wealth of information,
Mm-hmm.
talking about having been on so many times, and
If
Go ahead,
you could actually get a hold of him, I think David Madden would be a really interesting person to interview. He started the National History Bee and Ball, and he's taken that concept all over the world, and he travels everywhere starting similar competitions.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know Jeannie has had some contact with David, so that might be something that she might. I will pass that suggestion along to her. Also, we have another question for our, I guess, moving backwards to when Randy was on, but maybe you guys can answer as well, and maybe you guys can also help with your own experiences. But this one comes from @Jerry Shaw. What's the typical duration between completing the online quiz and appearance on the show? What was it in each of your cases, Eric, Jen, and Justin?
So I took the online quiz last January. Got an audition middle of October, and then actually got the call middle of November. So pretty quickly in terms of from auditioning to getting the call to be on the show. But like 10 months in between the exam, the test, and the audition.
Okay. When did you tape, Eric?
What's that?
When did you tape?
Oh, January 13th. So yeah, within a year, it was all over.
What about you, Jen?
It was a hugely long time for me. I can't remember when the online test was. I think I went to New York in April, so that would have been a couple months after the online test. And then this was April of 2013. So I got the call early December, I think it must have been, of this year. So it was almost 2 years start to finish for me.
Yeah, I think in 2013 the online test was back in January. I've been taking the online test every year since 2009, and so it's been in January. It's the first year I've taken.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I wonder. I wonder if you happened to get called at, because I've heard stories about how they sometimes when they throw out the contestant files that have expired or have gone 18 months, that they actually will still, as they're throwing them out, they will look and think, oh, maybe we can call by a bunch of people from what we're about to throw out. So maybe you got lucky in that respect there, Jen, but you got on, so that's all that matters.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. It had completely left my mind by the time they called. I thought I was already out of the pool, so it was a nice surprise.
Now, what about you, Justin?
My experience was very similar to Jen's. I took the online test in the spring of 2009 and auditioned in D.C. in May of 2009. I got the call in February of 2011, so just about 20 months from audition to getting the call. And so I think the idea that was expressed a minute ago about maybe the files that are being tossed get a second look, and decisions are maybe made to call people at that point. I think that makes a lot of sense, and that would explain a lot. But again, I remember thinking earlier in the week where I got the call, geez, I guess it's been more than 18 months. I guess I'll have to do the online test again next time it comes around. And later that same week, I got the call. So that was pretty awesome. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's crazy. A lot of the stories that I've heard have been people who it took a while to get the call, and I was kind of amazed when I heard so quickly. I don't know.
Yeah, and they're very vocal in the auditions that, a lot of the people in the room were there maybe their second or third time, and they were like, if you don't get called, don't stress about it. A lot of these people are coming back and coming back. So, who knows?
Yeah. Now, how many? Sorry, go ahead, Justin.
Casting for any show, and I think Jeopardy in particular, is such a black box in terms of what they're actually looking for in any one group of contestants. All you can do is sort of keep plugging away at it, just sort of bring a big personality to the auditions and try to follow the wealth of advice that's out there. I think there is substantially more publicly available advice about how to audition and how to succeed on Jeopardy than there was even a couple of years ago. Or maybe there was that information then and I just didn't know where to look for it. That's possible too.
No, you're right. It has. There's been a lot more lately. I mean, Keith's Final Wager has been up. The JeopardyFan.com. I think it's only less than 5 years old. JBoard has
now.
5 years now. Okay. JBoard.tv has grown from what it was before. So yeah, definitely the online community of people who want to give you help on getting on Jeopardy has definitely grown in just the last 5 years or less, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, so at this point, I think I usually open up the floor to the panel. If any panelist has any questions for anyone else who's been on the panel this evening, that feel free to go ahead and ask away, and I will go through just to check to see if you're still watching us and you have a last-minute question for the panel. You can definitely tweet at us at #JeopardyLivePanel. I'll just check also to see if there's any YouTube comments. But yeah, go ahead. If you're on the panel, ask away.
How great is it to win? What's the like feeling right after you win it?
Jen?
Bewilderment.
Yeah.
Just utter shock, and the fact that they're pulling you off stage to go get ready for the next one. You don't have a lot of time to process it. I'm sure Justin can speak to this far more eloquently and with a greater base of knowledge than I can.
Well, I think that you hit the nail on the head. Regardless of how many times you go through it, it stays bewildering because unless you're on some kind of multi-day run, it's pretty unusual to win on Jeopardy. I don't think you ever really get used to it. And the logistics are that you really do need to shake a leg, get changed. You need to be ready to move forward. And I will say that multiple iterations of that actually gets pretty tiring. And I found that my towards the end of my run, the biggest problem that I had was actually fatigue. And so maintaining that level of attention over the whole course of the day is a real challenge. But that moment when you realize that you're going to win, there's just nothing like it in the world. It's amazing.
I do remember that I was in that Friday game. Is just exhausting. By the end of the day, you're kind of just wiped.
I've always thought that fatigue was probably the reason that there are very few people who have won more than 7 or 8 games. You could probably count all the people who've won more than 7 or 8 games on one hand, maybe, because of the fatigue issue. It's just playing all those games.
That's right. I think that this is amenable to being looked at quantitatively to some extent. So I wonder how likely people are to turn it over on a Thursday or a Friday. The game that I lost in my original run was a Friday game. Looking back on that game, I made a tremendous. Well, I was outplayed, but it didn't exactly help that I made what I think was a tremendous number of mistakes that I probably would not have made if I had been coming at it fresh.
And I think that if you asked Tristan as well, she'd probably say the same thing, because it seemed like near the end of her run in her 5th and 6th games, it seemed like she was starting to flag a little bit as well, at least in my opinion.
I think that my impression was that I think there's playing the game is certainly tiring. The other thing that Kristen had going on was 2 cross-country round trips in the space of less than a week, which is definitely a lot to have to do.
Yes. And I think that was actually what felled Ken Jennings in the end as well, because before his final set of tapings, the Blue Jays actually flew him into Toronto for some promotional appearances, including throwing the first pitch out at a Blue Jays game. So instead of traveling from Salt Lake City to Los Angeles, he was traveling from Ottawa and Toronto to Los Angeles because he used the opportunity to come into Canada to visit some members of his wife's family who lived in Ottawa at the time. So again, it's easier, having to deal with jet lag is another major issue sometimes. So.
Although jet lag can be your friend coming from the East Coast, at least temporarily. I'm not a morning person constitutively, but the first day after I get to the West Coast, I'm up at 5:30 in the morning, feeling like $1,000,000. So, over a short period of time, that can actually help you out a lot.
I feel the same way if I get lucky enough to get the call, because I've heard that the contestants have to be outside the hotel at 7:30 in the morning for the shuttle to the studio, and normally I wouldn't be able to be up that early, let alone fully dressed and ready to go. But being on a time zone 3 hours earlier than New York, where I live, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah,
7:30 in the morning now.
What's that?
There's a 7:30 in the morning now.
Yeah.
Yes, and I would say in my own case as well as Harvey. I mean, my own job, by its nature means I am up later at night and I am up later in the morning. So going out to the West Coast, I think I would be able to handle Pacific time very well. But so yeah, that's a.
But flying back and forth transcontinentally would get fatiguing over time.
Yes, I think so. Okay, we actually have what I'm going to from at Jeopardy tweet again. Long story short. Canada killed Ken Jennings' streak. Sorry world. # Jeopardy live panel. So.
Blame Canada.
Okay, yeah. So I'm guessing apparently not only Jeopardy tweet is apparently Canadian as well. I'm not entirely sure who that is, who is behind that account, but I'm sure they will reveal themselves to me at some point. So it's nearing 11 o'clock Eastern, and so I think it's just about time for us to say goodbye for another week. The next one will be taking place in the afternoon, I believe, on Saturday, April 4th, just because of Easter weekend. I think that's probably going to be the best time for that. There is a good chance our guests next Saturday will include Jason Keller, who recently returned from the American Crossword Puzzle Tournament. So we'll be talking with him about his experiences about that, hopefully, assuming he is able to appear. And on that note, I'd like to thank all of our panel once again. Thanks for joining us, David, Eric, Harvey, Jen, and Justin, for Andy Saunders and the JeopardyFan.com. So thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for taking part. Let me just try to get the credits screen up because I'm trying very hard to impart some slightly better production values on this podcast. But for Andy Saunders, Jeannie Kinkle, and everyone at the JeopardyFan.com, thank you for tuning in, and have an excellent night.